my name is Christy Thompson, and I'm with BIS. And I'm going to go over just a few things before we get started here. If you have any questions, we're going to try to take them throughout the presentation, but we may have to wait until the end. So if you'll just pop those into the chat, we'll open up everybody's mic at the end if you want to ask some questions there as well. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce it, but our webinar today is how to set achievable financial goals for your business in 2022. And we have Phillip Long. He is the owner of BIS and Cyber Fortress. He is a technologist and entrepreneur who specializes in providing technology solutions and security consulting to businesses along the Gulf Coast. He's worked in the IT industry for over 20 years. He has 600 plus clients from Gulfport to Gulf Breeze and all the way up to Montgomery. He's the current owner of 5 businesses, and he's also a certified information system security professional. So I'm going to hand it over to Phillip because he's going to introduce you to a really important guest we have today. So Phillip.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Christy. And I'm going to take this one standing up and with the camera on just for you, Josh. I'd like to introduce a good friend of mine and a great guy, Mr. Josh Knoll. He is a financial advisor, and he really takes a unique approach, I think, in a lot of ways to the way that he does business. And one of the things that really sticks out to me about him is that it's really his openness about sharing information. You have podcasts, you do webinars, you're really, focused on educating people. So, Josh believes that the best way to serve his clients in a transparent fee environment with no sales quotas and an open and honest relationship where he and his clients are part of a team, really a partnership is what I would call it. Full disclosure, Josh is my financial advisor, and I'm impressed enough with him and the services he's offered me that I am, I want him to try to help my clients and, the people that I have influence over. So Josh, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Phillip. I'm very excited.
Yeah. And anything you want to add to your credentials or your philosophy that may be of importance?
Well, I think what you said about being open and transparent and honest, a lot of that stems from the fact that I came into this business in my mid-30s as already a fully formed man, if you will. And so I always had those questions and those misunderstandings. And I brought all those things to the table. To whereas, when someone wanted to know that information, whether they're asking it or providing it, it just seemed natural to me. So I came in, you could even say I come in with a little bit of a skeptical eye to the whole industry. And as a result, by being open and transparent, I feel like we've kind of carved out a niche and grown more than we would have if we had done it, quote unquote, the old school way, if you will.
Great. Yeah. And so today I want to, we have a very unique environment. I think, I've been in business for 20 plus years doing this, and before that. So, I've been around a minute or two, and I believe it's very unique in the fact that we have, they call it the resignation era or whatever. People are just quitting their jobs, and we've got all types of challenges that are out there. And a lot of it would make us almost want to just give up. And we want to be sure that, of course, we're not giving up. And so one way to do that is by setting goals. So I thought it was very, a good topic to work on is with, sorry, my phone is ringing. There we go. I thought this would be a really good topic on, for 2022 small business, setting goals. But sadly, 5% of small businesses achieve their goals. So there's something wrong there from the get-go. And I don't know, Josh, in your industry, what are you seeing as far as people in their engagement, their, kind of with the particular business climate that we're in?
Well, I think one of the things of setting goals that maybe has been difficult is 2020 was such a radical departure for so many different businesses when COVID hit. And it's been kind of unique to see the different outcomes it's had on different industries. Some industries have struggled to basically keep the doors open. Some have had their best last 2 years ever, 2020 and 2021. So I think that part of the goal setting was the distractions that many businesses encountered, both on the downside when they're dealing with supply chain issues, they're dealing with increased costs, they're dealing with difficulty of keeping employees. And then also on the other side, when they're dealing with more demand than they've ever had before, they're not keeping up with demand. Now they've got customers that are clamoring for their particular products. I think a lot of it is just getting reset to what you are focused on with your business, because if you are constantly dealing with the distractions, both good and bad, chances are that you're not working towards those goals. And I think one of the main points of your webinar is going to be intentionality and focus on setting those goals, making them realistic, and then actually staying focused on them and not getting distracted like we all do. I have this morning, big time. So
yeah, for sure. One of the things that I wanted to, start off the discussion with is really the mindset. Because if 5% of businesses, I guarantee if you surveyed business owners and you said, hey, is goal setting an important part of business? We're going to get close to 100% in agreement, but yet only 5% are meeting their goals. So there is a big disparity there. And I think a lot of it gets down to just the overall mindset. And this is something that I tell myself, and I have opportunity to tell others. And I hope it works better on you guys than it does me. But I tell myself this all the time. I'm like, you will not solve your problems using the same mindset that you have created the problem with. So, we have to have a new mindset whenever we're coming at a challenge. And I think that is very important. And I'm going to share a couple of things that I resort back to. And I'm pretty simple-minded. So I have, things that I can remember in my head is the way I operate. And I'll share that in a second. But let's talk about mindset. What is the mindset of someone who is financially successful, Josh?
Well, I think the mindset a lot of times first starts with a belief in what they are doing, a belief that maybe they are not necessarily unique or uniquely talented, although that helps, but that they are uniquely committed to producing or providing a service that they think they can be at least, if not competitive, they can be above competitive with their other peers. And then I think once you have that mindset, then a lot of the times, as you know, Phillip, you and I both started our entrepreneurial endeavors very young. A lot of times it's just a matter of having the mindset of, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to set goals. I'm going to have a realistic self-awareness of what I bring to the table and what I don't. And once I've kind of put that on the table, then I'm going to make the decision. I'm going to be intentional about taking this chance, because a lot of times you will see people that will dip their toe in the water. There's nothing wrong with that, especially, quote unquote, the side hustle industry. But a lot of times the mindset for a successful business owner, particularly one that's going to survive many years or possibly even generations, is somebody that comes in and believes in themselves, believes what they are doing, and has a mindset, I'm going to jump in fully and I'm not going to stop swimming until I make it to the other side.
Yeah. You don't fail until you quit.
Great way to sum it up.
Yeah, there you go. All right. I want to talk about just really, for everybody to kind of get in a mindset of what do we really want to achieve in 2022? Because I think it's really important to have a narrow focus. I'm just fresh off of a 2-day, we do an annual retreat. We do a quarterly 1 day and we do a 2-day annual. So I have literally spent the last 2 days with my leadership team. So this is very fresh for me. The timing of this was just really providential in a lot of ways. But so I'm hot on this right now. And so I want to just talk for just a second about some things that is hot on my mind, having just gotten through a 2-day offsite setting goals. One thing that I think that I do is I have a lot of things and they change, like the goals that I have, they change too much. And the goals that I set are not what's called SMART. And I'm sure all of the business people on here have heard this acronym before, but it's got to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. And if you take a goal and you do not, you can write it out. And this is how we did it. I mean, literally yesterday when we were setting goals, I would write them out and just sentence format. And then I would go back in and I would change them. Is this real narrow? Is it very specific? And then how am I measuring this goal? How am I going to know if I'm hitting that mark? And then is it attainable? Is it, sometimes we pie in the sky and we all, we'll overestimate what we can do in 6 months and we'll way underestimate what we can do in 3 years. And then is it realistic? Is this something, I often use relative in that. Is it relative? Is it really the top priority? Is it the highly productive activity that I need to be engaged in? And then when am I going to know it's done? And then literally I use OneNote as my system that I use, and I put things in OneNote and I go back to them and I move them. I used to do it day by day, then I went to week by week, and now I do them month by month. And, I go back and see if I'm doing that. And anytime I get a free moment or, I'm not doing something, I'll go back and look at my list, because literally I bet, and we didn't have that many goals. I think we only set 4 goals for the company yesterday. And I couldn't tell you what all 4 of them are right now today. So if I don't write them down and I don't have them in a format that has a time sensitivity and a scale where I can measure how I did, I'll never do it. And I think that is my biggest thing, is that I will change my goal rather than actually finish the one that I'm on. And I think it's cost me, a lot of effort, probably a lot of frustration to my team. So Josh, weigh in on that goal setting technique.
Well, I think one thing that is fairly common with entrepreneurial minded people is they tend to set goals that are, like you said earlier, Phillip, pie in the sky. And for them, that's okay, because it's kind of, they're always reaching. They know that a lot of times they're going to have a particular goal sitting on a piece of paper or on a document or on their board that they may not reach for years. Well, that's fine for the entrepreneur, but that may not necessarily be fine for the employees and the partners that they bring in with them that maybe are not geared that way entrepreneurially and don't need necessarily things that they can't touch, feel, and actually achieve. So I think one of the things that I've had to learn over the years is with my goal setting is it's fine if my particular really super designated goals for myself are pie in the sky. I know that's how I'm wired. I know that, technically for many things, I may never actually fully achieve them, because what is full achievement? That just means I'm moving on to the next higher level goal of whatever that was. But I also need to make sure that I set things that everybody can understand and that are actually achievable, not just for their own psyche, but so that the business can actually track where it's at and where it's going. And then Phillip, I do long-term, midterm, and I do short-term goals. The long-term stuff tends to be the shorter list, tends to be the bigger ticket items, obviously. Midterm goals in my line of work would be something, let's say 6 to 9 months out. And then I'll get fairly granular on my short-term goals. In fact, it can sometimes bleed over into a to-do list, which I have to be careful with. But, for me, just like you said earlier, if it's spoken, that has impact, especially I've gotten older, I pay more attention to what people are saying. But if you really want to hit me between the eyes with it, it needs to be in writing. And once I see it in writing, I'm almost like a trained dog. I'm going to follow that path. And as long as I've set that path correctly, then I'm going to be walking down the right path, both in short term, midterm, and long term.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And I think one of the things that I know I frustrate people with is probably not classifying the goal. And being, I am by definition, like even, they've charted me or whatever, they've tested me, and I'm a visionary. And if you're that way, you're going to be bouncing ideas off of people. You're going to have this idea. It's not even halfway formed. I always say it could be a brainstorm or it could be brain flatulence, right? And so you have to be real careful with who you share that with. I think is an important component on goal setting as well, because you want people to be, psyched up about getting into your meeting that goal, and you don't want to put things out there that they make them feel like, wow, he's way out of the ballpark on this one. We'll keep, for the sake of time, I want to keep moving, because I know you've got some very specific things from a financial perspective that we want to talk about. There's some things that this is straight from Stephen Covey right here. And this has helped me probably more than anything. And like I said, I'm a pretty simple guy in a lot of ways. The way that I think is I love to be able to put my time, because time is one of the most valuable assets. It's the great equalizer. And I see so many people, they can't get things done. And it's because I think they don't have their time in a bucket. And this represents what this screen represents is a Q1. It's broken down into 4 quadrants. Q1 is necessity. In my line of work, somebody's server's down, something bad has happened from a security, cybersecurity incident. Those are, that's a crisis. It's got to be taken care of. A Q2 type activity is proactive work. It's meaningful work. It's refueling your engines. It's learning. It's planning. And a Q3 is a distraction. That's something that's really needless. And then, it's unnecessary, it's irrelevant. And then a Q4 is just a total waste of time. And a lot of times when I'm doing my day, I will literally be thinking about what I'm doing and I will put it into one of those buckets. And it kind of makes me smile when I'm in Q2, because I'm gonna let the money guy, I'm gonna show it in the money way, because Q1 is an equal return on investment. Pretty much all the effort I put in. And I had a theologian, R.C. Sproul, talking about the root word for energy is ERG, erg. And, anything that we do, we're basically bleeding off or paying out energy, which is a resource, into that task. And a Q1 activity is going to give us a 1-to-1 return. And kind of the trick on Q1 stuff is we want to minimize things that are learn from our mistakes. If some of the fires or the necessities or the crisis situations are self-inflicted, we want to try to put measures in place so they don't happen as often. A Q2 is we have an extraordinary return on investment. It's where we plan something, we build a process, we train others, we have great relationships that we can then lean on whenever we get into a particular situation. And time and energy gives us a huge return on investment. A Q3 activity, which is basically distraction type work, is going to give us a much lower return on investment. It's going to be something that, some people like me will chase a shining object. And so if you're doing that, you find yourself doing that, you have to say, God, man, this is just I'm burning up this resource called time, and it's just really not worth it. And then Q4 is just a waste of time. And so we want to really, I think, putting ourselves into that mindset is very helpful. I'll let you all go back to this screen and see if you want to weigh in and add anything to that.
Yeah, I've got Rochelle had a question on setting aggressive goals.
I answer that.
Yeah, I want to jump in a couple things there. So Rochelle, I would say the first thing is don't shy away from that. Your goals should make you uncomfortable, because if your goals don't make you uncomfortable, then you just got average goals. And, typically people that are goal oriented are trying to be above average. So don't necessarily shy away from that. How you want to look at it is I'm very big on doing a what, why, and how exercise with my goals. And if I get background noise, I apologize. We have a busy office going right now, but I do a what, why, and how exercise. What is the goal? How am I going to achieve it? And then most importantly is why. How strong is my why? We always use the kill the bear analogy when we do various seminars, and it sounds kind of violent. It's not. If you were standing on one side of a space and there was a bear between you and whatever you were trying to achieve on the other side, well, what if it was $100 on the other side of the bear? Are you really going to try to get through that bear? What if it was $1,000? What if it was even $1 million? What if it had nothing to do with money? What if it was your favorite pet, your dog, your cat, maybe your kid? Well, your why, nothing changed with the how or the what. You've got a bear standing in your way and you've got to get around that bear, but your why changes. And if your why is strong enough when it comes to your goal setting, you'll get through the bear. You will kill the bear, you'll get to the other side, and you will achieve that goal. So to answer your question on that, Rochelle, was don't shy away from aggressive goals, but definitely take a look at the what, why, and how. If you're just setting that goal pie in the sky because it makes you feel better that you've got this aspirational goal, but you don't have a plan on what and why and how to get there, then chances are you're never going to get close or even achieve it. The other thing too that Phillip, I wanted to segue on with the 4 quadrants is I use something fairly simple, probably learned it from you to be fair, but the important/urgent quadrant, which kind of falls in these 4 quadrants. You know, I divide when we get really, really covered up, busy. I have whiteboards all in my office. One of them is dedicated to the urgent and important board. And, you know, we'll go through, there are things that are important, but they're not urgent. There are things that are urgent, but not necessarily that important. And what we try to do is divide those into the 4 things. And without fail, the extraordinary productivity, the Q2 would fall into the urgent and important type of goals. Right. A lot of times, not always urgent necessarily, but definitely always important. So I think that's really important for just establishing those because we're human beings. I did it this morning, you know, took probably half an hour of doing some stuff that I really didn't need to do, but you know, it would have fallen in the Q3 or Q4, but I always have something, a written plan in front of me that knocks me back into place and gets me heading down the right path.
That's right. I think you said it right there, a written plan. And if you can get it over to a calendar of when it's got to be done, you know, you're going to get that big return. So, all right, we're going to kind of talk a little bit. I want to focus on your expertise here. Let's talk about, you know, we talked a little bit about the challenge we're having with staffing, you know, the great resignation, as they call it. Let's talk about the benefits to a qualified retirement plan and even some of the nuances. And Josh has helped me in a particular area, and it'll get us maybe in the weeds too much, Josh. So right. You keep us out of the weeds, but I think that it's something that business owners, I never would have known that had I not met you. Right. And it's going to change my retirement and my kids' inheritance. So that means a lot to me.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, I think first thing, Phillip, we want to do is just define what do we mean when we say qualified retirement plan. That's really just a fancy way of saying something that's offered in a manner that gets tax preferential treatment from the IRS. You know, most of everybody's heard of a 401k or an IRA. Those are qualified plans in exchange for either getting tax deferred growth in that plan, a pre-tax deduction, or in the case of a Roth, getting post-tax but tax-free growth. In exchange for that, the IRS says you're going to have limits on how much you can put into this qualified plan, and you're going to have some restrictions on when you can pull it out without penalty. Typically 59.5 up to 72 retirement before they start making you take it out. So when you hear the word qualified plan, don't let that throw you off. Really what we're going to be referring to, particularly for you all that are self-employed or business owners, are going to be things you're familiar with: 401ks, IRAs, CISSPs, things of that nature. So what I'm going to do, Phillip, so that we don't get caught in the weeds, I'm just going to run in reverse order of what would be the most common retirement plan, qualified retirement plans for business owners / self-employed or entrepreneurs. We'll start with the one that typically is offered or used with a closely held company. A lot of times we'll see it with husband and wife teams, and that's a SEP IRA. A SEP IRA is going to give you the largest pre-tax contribution. It'll be $61,000 in 2022. So it really gives you some horsepower on putting money away that's going to get tax deferred. You won't get taxed on it until you pull out retirement. And you can make the largest swab that you can make in a typical qualified retirement plan will be in the SEP at 61,000. Now, for a lot of people, 61,000 is a huge number. And so again, historically, normally, if you will, we see SEPs come into play when somebody's really started hitting their prime earning years. They've got a closely held business. They've got consistent cash flow. They know that they can put $50,000, $60,000 away in a retirement plan and not miss it. It's not denting their emergency fund or hampering their business or anything of that nature. So again, a SEP can be for a larger corporation, but typically you will see a SEP IRA, Simplified Employee Pension. You will see that in a more closely held or smaller company. Working your way up the chain, a lot of businesses will start with a simple IRA. Now, simple IRA can go up to 100 employees. Normally, historically, you don't necessarily see them that large. At that point, they would have made the choice to flip to a 401k. But with a simple IRA, you don't get as much pre-tax contribution as you do with the SEP. You get $14,000 with a $3,000 catch-up if you're 50 years or older. So for a total of $17,000. But a simple IRA is a great way for a smaller, quote unquote, smaller business, 5, 10, say 20 employees that can set up a plan. It's called simple for a reason. It's relatively easy to set up, administrate, contribute. The employer has some choices on how they match. They do have to match. And our suggestion has always been, if you're going to go to the work of opening simple for your employees, go ahead and plan on doing 3% match. That'll keep you out of trouble with anybody that's looking at it to make sure it's in compliance. Plus, you're really trying to incentivize that person not only to contribute, but also to stick around later, which we'll get into on a different slide. And then lastly, the 401k, which everybody has heard of, public sector would refer to as a 403b. The limits for a 401k for 2022 is $20,500. That is a pre-tax contribution limit for the year. Of course, you got to make that much income to make that type of contribution. And then you have a $6,500 catch up if you're 55 or older. So you can put in as much as $27,000 in just a typical off the shelf 401k plan. What you'll normally see with a 401k plan is they are going to offer profit sharing and or matching. So those limits can get a little bit higher. All right. So that's the nuts and bolts of what a qualified plan is. Why would you offer it? Well, for the business owner, and again, I'll go back to what I said earlier, you may have had your best cash flow or maybe your best profit years over the last couple of years. And you're coming in an opportunity where making money is fantastic, but it can kind of suck when you go to pay your taxes for that year. So a 401k plan or a SEP or even a simple, even with the lower contributions limits, those are going to be pre-tax contributions that you're going to put in that's allow you to deduct that from your income taxes due for that particular year. So for the business owner, it's a great way to defer taxes, especially if they've got a business that's really humming along and maybe they're starting to look down the road at where they might retire or sell the business. And at that point, when they get to that point, again, historically, they're probably going to be in a lower tax bracket. So the goal of those plans is to defer from a higher marginal tax bracket now to a lower marginal tax bracket in retirement. Okay, great for the business owner. What does it do for your employees? Well, one, as we said earlier, with the simple, really with all of them, the SEP has the ability to match, the simple and the 401k. And again, if any business owners are on here, I would encourage you, if you're going to offer those plans to your employees, one, you have to match on a simple, but go ahead and plan on doing a match. 3% is kind of industry norm, but anything above and beyond that is just going to be that much more appealing to your participants. The other thing is too, it gives your employees two broad things. One, it makes them stickier to you. People would think that 401k IRAs are such a common term that every business offers them. That's not the truth. In fact, I think the last study they did was somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 or 50 million working Americans don't have access to a qualified retirement plan. So right away, you're going to distinguish yourself as a little bit more, you're trying to get a little bit above your competition in your peer group by offering this. You're going to not only attract, but you're probably going to retain a little bit higher caliber of talent. They're going to be a little stickier to you. Plus, it tends to give, as Phillip has seen in his own line of work, it tends to give your employees a little longer outlook on what they're doing. Especially as we all get older. We were all in our 20s at one time. We thought we would live forever, but you start getting in your 30s and your 40s and your 50s and you have families. If you've got an employer that is offering a qualified plan and is providing a match and you have a competitor coming after you that is not offering the same, that's not equal ground. Even if the competitor is offering you more money, you are probably looking longer term. You're going to be stickier to your current employer.
For sure. Yeah. A couple things that we did as far as trying to keep key employees and keep employees loyal. One thing that I really think that you need to do in a very tactful way is to, and I've used Josh to come over and talk to my team about what we've done. So they're not necessarily hearing it from me, but they almost need to hear it. You need to highlight the good that you're doing, and maybe you bring in somebody like your financial planner guy, your 401k guy, or whatever. I think that's really important because sometimes people forget. But another thing is that we did is we went and I was looking at what kind of benefit would be really good for people, and we chose to go with a 100% funded BIS long-term disability, where if an employee got hurt here or got subject to some kind of disease or something where they couldn't work, after 6 months they get 66% of their pay for their lifetime. And we thought about that a lot. The short term was a little cheaper, not really that much cheaper actually. And we went that route. That was another thing that we did. And of course, with the plan that you guys helped me get connected with, we were able to, I'm doing a full 7% match, or 7% contribution into my employees' IRA, because strategically what I'm thinking is that I want to get a person who is more long-term focused, so that whenever we go into the recruiting, we're out there trying to hire and we're like, yeah, we give a 7%, a 7% contribution. The person that hears that maybe is a bit more, I'll say financially mature or whatever. I'm thinking that's going to be a better employee than what you would get for somebody who just wants an extra $1 an hour raise or something.
Absolutely.
So any other things you want to talk about here under this kind of heading of keeping employees loyal to you?
Yeah, Phillip, that's a great segue, because what we were referring to earlier was kind of a loose concept for keeping your rank and file, both attracting and retaining them. Well, with any organization, you're always going to have key employees. And with, the robust offering that you offer at your company, already you kind of distinguished yourself above and beyond maybe some of your competitor group. So offering the qualified plans is a great way, particularly for your 401k. But within any organization, you're always going to have key employees, especially as the business matures and people gain certain specialties and experiences. One of the things that we use for this particular segment for keeping your key employees loyal is called non-qualified deferred comp. Now, that's a big word, big bunch of words with a bunch of vowels. Most of you all have heard that. It's loosely called the golden handcuffs. Yep. So I won't go in the weeds on that too much, but one of the ways above and beyond, or in partnership with your qualified plan, with your rank and file, is the things that you can do for your key employees would be a non-qualified deferred comp. What does that do? Well, remember what we said earlier about qualified comp having certain restrictions. Non-qualified deferred comp has a little bit more flexibility for rewarding your key employees without having to work with the rank and file as much. And what it does, it's deferred. Now, it's not deferred forever, but you're deferring it out in a manner to where you're now in lockstep with that key employee. Not only are they helping you build the business and doing things that maybe you can't do anymore because of your time constraints, or maybe they have a unique talent, whatever it may be. Any organization could point to one or two or a handful of people and say, if I were to lose that person, it would have a detrimental financial effect on my business. Well, non-qualified deferred comp is a way to keep those people around, keeping them in lockstep with you. And what it does, it allows it to build up this deferred base of an asset over time. And on the reverse side of that is you can set that time period to whatever is appropriate for your particular industry. If you have somebody that's really important to you and you have a kind of a long burn industry, then maybe we look at setting that timetable at 10, 15, 20 years out. If you got something where you're really going through talent fast and they move on to other things, maybe you do it shorter, but you still want to lock them in for a particular amount of time. What you can also do, coupling with that non-qualified deferred comp, which is something we're going to go to on the next segment as it becomes business owners, but you can also tie that into some financial protection if, God forbid, that key employee, forget quitting, maybe they become disabled or they prematurely pass. You have the ability to protect the family protect the business in a way that you never can replace a person. People are very valuable. We've learned that over the years, particularly over the last couple of years with COVID. But what you can do is at least try to absorb the financial impact of the loss of that employee if something were to happen to them or before expected. Okay. And Phillip, I'll go ahead and segue into this because it really ties into that. Everything I just said there for your key employees. Obviously, you can do non-qualified deferred comp for your executive level key employees. With it being non-qualified, you have a lot of flexibility. What a lot of people, I think, tend to forget, we're almost jumping now from a relatively complicated concept of non-qualified deferred comp back to a base route. How do you protect your family and your business in case you become unexpectedly disabled or deceased? Well, I can tell you in my role, and I've been doing this now 12 years, it's kind of amazing how often someone comes in, has a very viable business with a family depends on that cash flow, and they've got everything great as far as long as they are alive and as functional as they are now for that business to keep doing what it's doing for many years to come. What happens if you don't? What happens if you, again, unexpectedly pass, or you have a disability that is unexpected, a car wreck, a significant illness, things of that nature. What most business owners probably don't realize, because a lot of times they're dealing with, especially the successful business owners, they see a lot of cash flow come in the door. They think, hey, business will be fine. If something were to happen to me, I will be gone. Somebody will step in my place and off we go. My family will be taken care of, and so on and so forth. As any entrepreneur can tell you, as anybody that's dealt with the other side of that equation, that's not always the case. It's very difficult a lot of times, especially when you have a charismatic founder that really built the foundation of the business, to replace that. So what this is intended to do for you all is very simple. If you're a business owner or a self-employed professional, entrepreneur, or anything like that, it is incredibly affordable to get basic life insurance and basic disability that is tied to your ability to perform at the level that you do, so that if something were to happen to you, you have protected your family. And you've also carved off enough to the business to where, if it's important to you, the business has the financial resources to continue on to the next generation. And then last note on that particular thing, Phillip, too, it's kind of a specialty niche, but a lot of people don't realize, we were talking about a person's individual life expectancy or disability event. A lot of people don't realize too, with businesses, that you can do a business overhead expense policy. Now, this is different from your umbrella policy that's intended to cover the catastrophic loss of a physical item, a building or a car or something of that nature. A business overhead expense, a lot of times you'll see with professional services, doctors, attorneys, things of that nature, where if they are unable to perform their duties because of a disability event, which in the event of a surgeon could be simply losing a finger, they have a plan that comes in and pays for the overhead of that business for a set number of months or years, that allows them to find someone with a comparable amount of skills to come in and replace them. And that's a great bridge a lot of times for service-oriented and professional organizations.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing, something that I did very early on that was really, it set me up for so much success, was a whole life policy where it was overfunded and I had cash value, basically becoming your own banker. Is that something you want to talk about, or is that getting too much in the weeds?
I mean, probably too much in the weeds on this, just because it's it's particular to the business owner, their mindset, their cash flow, things of that nature. But I think it segues everything we're saying here, Phillip, because a lot of people, again, don't realize how dynamic the risk management industry has become over the last 10 to 15 years, where you can do a lot of things that I just mentioned. You can do what you just mentioned with building cash. A lot of times you can do that in a complete package. You have the ability to build these things really specifically tailored to your unique needs, where not only do you have some downside protection in case things go sideways, but you also got some upside potential to where, if you need money, if you need to get money for an asset purchase or expansion or hire an employee, you can, as Phillip said, you have the ability to be your own bank on something that historically, not guaranteed, but historically will build cash over time.
Yeah. Josh, when you and I were talking, and I'm going to kind of relate to where I think a lot of business people are, because I meet with a bunch of them, I told you that I wanted every stroke that I made with the oar to have that oar planted. I want my arms as far out as I can reach them. I want that oar at the proper depth in the water, and I want to pull a full, firm stroke. And yeah, that was a mindset when I was 50 years old or whatever. If I would have had that mindset at 30 years old and been able to, you know what I'm saying? And really, that's why you got to build a team out around you that can, understand you. Because I'm sure you had a great time understanding me, probably still scratching your head. But, you took a lot of time to understand me so that you understand what I'm trying to do. If I would have had that 20 years ago, man, I would be, a lot further along. But from a business person's mindset, I think that we're so damn scared that tomorrow the other shoe's going to drop, or this thing's going to fall to pieces. So we just work ourselves to a frazzle rather than working a little smarter and taking the advice of some folks. So I'll throw that in there. And I guess we'll jump now onto, about, funded buy-sell agreements. Well, let's talk about just what is a buy-sell agreement, because you would be surprised. I know so many business owners who do not have an adequate buy-sell agreement.
Well, so a buy-sell in and of itself is a fairly simple concept. Phillip and I are partners in the business. I like Phillip. We bring unique skill sets and work ethic to the table. We build this business and it's profitable and things are great. However, maybe I don't get along with Phillip's wife, or maybe Phillip's kids are not part of the business. Or on my side, maybe Phillip, maybe I am coming off my 5th marriage or something, and Phillip's like, I don't even know who this lady is. If something happens to Josh, now she's going to inherit 50% of this business. To me, then, that may mean the business is not functional moving forward. So a buy sell really is intended to help you avoid unwanted business partners. Doesn't always necessarily have to be family. I don't mean to pick on family. That's just the most common. And a lot of times it's unintentional. A lot of times a family member is coming in after an event that no one foresaw, and they're trying to get their head around the business, and they're not sure who to trust, and they don't necessarily understand how the business makes money or could potentially lose money. So how to avoid an unwanted business partner, the fundamental root of that is having a written buy-sell agreement to start. That is the start. And at its root, a buy-sell agreement, which I'm not an attorney, I don't provide, attorney can provide that for you, but it is going to designate a certain dollar amount and a certain method of paying off whoever stands to inherit that percentage part of the business typically in a partnership. So in Phillip and I's case, we have a buy sell, we have agreed upon number. Something happens to me, Phillip's buy sell agreement calls for the stroking of that said dollar amount to my heirs. Phillip now owns 100% of the business in a 50-50 partnership, and off he goes. And he can run the business as he wants. He can bring on another partner, but he's not forced to bring on an unwanted business partner. Now, everything I just said to you, the problem with business buy sell agreements is that's usually where people stop. They write the agreement out, they put a number down, and they put it in a filing cabinet, and they move on with their lives. Well, there's 2 problems with that. One is, if you've got a profitable business that's growing, it's going to be worth more, possibly year to year, but definitely over a period of time. So if you've got a buy sell agreement that's 5, 10, 15 years old, and you go back now and you look at that valuation number, more often than not, it's going to make you chuckle because it's going to be too small. All right. Second problem is going to be, how do you fund it? So a lot of times there's different ways to fund a buy sell agreement. There's no right or wrong answer. A lot of it depends on your cash flow and your comfortableness with debt or with how much money you have in the bank. Obviously, one way to fund it is just use cash. If you've got a business that holds a significant amount of cash and you've got agreed upon buy sell number that is adjusted as the business grows, this is a living, breathing document, not dissimilar to a will. Okay, fine. Then cash is your answer. The other way is sinking funds. You can have an investment account. You can structure it to be as risky or as non-risky as you want, but that sinking fund is dedicated to the buyout of the buy-sell agreement in a partnership. And it could be more than 2 partners, it could be 3 or 4 partners, but you have designated an account for that. Some people will go to installment payments. I can tell you just from my experience, people that inherit businesses typically don't like to see payments. They like to see the money now. And a lot of times you can probably get a more favorable relationship out of it if you bring cash to the table now versus doing payments over time. But that is one way where people will structure it, with installment payments. Some don't do anything, and they rely on their relationship with the bank. They go to borrow the funds when they need to execute a trigger in a buy-sell agreement. Because remember, a buy-sell agreement doesn't necessarily have to be triggered by a death or a disability. It could be triggered by the fact that, again, using me, Josh and Phillip as an example, Phillip, I want out. Well, if we don't have a buy-sell agreement and it's not funded, now we're back and forth negotiating, almost guaranteed that I'm going to think it's worth more than you think it's worth. So how do we come to that agreement? Part of the buy-sell exercise is having that open and honest communication, so it's not a shock to the other person or the people that are inheriting their position when that moment comes. So problem with borrowing funds is, a lot of times, if any entrepreneurs out there listening, Phillip can attest to this, I can attest to this. A lot of times with a entrepreneurial business, the credit worthiness of the business with the bank is tied to the founder. Not that the business is necessarily different, better or worse without that founder, but they're usually, a lot of times, the bank took a chance on that person when they were starting out, got rewarded for it. And that line of credit or that credit agreeability is more often not tied to the founder or founders of the company. You want to be careful of that when you go to look, if you want to fund with borrowing funds. And then the last way, the 5th way, ties back into what we were saying earlier, is you can fund a buy-sell agreement very affordably with a life insurance contract and a disability contract. A disability contract on a buy sell, it typically is going to be a lump sum. And typically you're going to have a longer time to wait for that, because if you play this out in the real world, you had Phillip and I are partners. I get in a bad car wreck. Well, Phillip's not going to just next day say, hey, Josh, man, there's no way, you're all banged up. You're not going to be good for a long time. Let's go ahead and trigger this. No, Phillip's a good guy. He's got a big heart. He's going to give me time to see if I can heal, to see if I can come back productive in that environment. And so after 6 months, maybe even up to a year, if it's obvious to both Phillip and I that I cannot perform like I did because of my injury or my illness, then we can look at triggering the buy sell and pointing to that disability policy to help fund the purchase of my part of the company. And those are the basic ways to avoid unintended business partners, because I can tell you, we see it so often. And everybody comes in with good intentions, but it's tough. It's tough,
Yeah,
especially
sure.
when you have one or two partners and you all speak a certain language that helped you build the business like you did.
For sure. Having a guy just recently bought out my partner about a year and a half ago, something we went through. We had a buy-sell agreement funded by whole life insurance, and that would have worked. But this happened to be not a death or not being able to work. This was more just he wanted out. So I went through that. I can think of countless times in my career of dealing with businesses where you just know things. I know several partner agreements right now. The partners hate each other, tough, no exit, no exit strategy. I know several where people have been really permanently injured, if you will. I'll use that term, where they're never going to come back and be a viable partner. So these are things that people really need to think about, because half of winning's not losing is a statement I use often, and a bad event like this could really have you losing.
Well, and you want to avoid resentment.
Yeah.
It's hard. Again, in our example, Phillip, to wrap up this slide, I'm not able to produce at the level I wanted, but because we didn't have a funded buy-sell agreement, I'm bound to, because I got to make money. And
Yeah.
you, on the other hand, over time may become a little resentful that I'm pulling 50% or 25% of the weight that I used to, yet I'm still receiving 100% the compensation I did. So it definitely is a way to avoid resentment. There's no perfect way to wrap a bow on it, but it is open communication that will hopefully provide a peaceful and satisfactory solution.
Yeah. And you can do it when there's no catastrophic event.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. You can sit back and look at it from 4 different angles to make sure that it's going to work the way you want it. So, well, good. Well, this is something actually that Josh can speak to about how to grow business using technology, website, and social media, because one of the big things I think, Josh, that is different about the way that you operate is you've engaged the market in a way that is, I think, what I would say would be relevant, but much different than the traditional financial planner. You're an educator, and even you being on this call to certain financial planners, and you openly, we talked about what we were going to talk about, but there's certainly, this thing wasn't scripted down to where we had to turn it into your broker dealer.
Right.
So a lot of guys steer clear of that. So from a financial planner standpoint, what do you think are the components or the key essentials that it takes to grow a business in this marketplace?
Well, for my particular industry, it was a matter of necessity. I came in and decided to go independent so that I could have my voice heard. Well, not that I necessarily directly compete with the bigger competitors in town, Merrill Lynch, Ed Jones, so on and so forth, but I do compete in some degree, and I don't have the advertising budget to compete with them, especially not out of the bat. So my way to kind of cut through and gather some awareness of even the fact that my business existed was by utilizing social media. And then I coupled that with my website, and I coupled that with forcing myself to get up to speed on technology, because as you and I have talked, Phillip, even though we're both in a technology driven, here we can say hi. Even though you and I are both in a technology driven industry, you and I are old enough that we didn't necessarily grow up with this stuff. We didn't grow up with phones in our hands and laptops on our lap all the time and things like that. So we had to force ourselves to learn this stuff. So with all that said, what I learned really quickly with the social media was no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I coupled that with what you said earlier about having an educator's heart. I came in the business fully formed, my own set of questions, my own set of skepticism. And I thought, if I do nothing else and make people feel a little bit more comfortable about maybe their lack of awareness or lack of knowledge of the industry, and couple that with just letting them to get to know me, I'm going to keep my social media strategy that simple. And that's what I did. I just came in and just decided to talk in a manner that is genuine to me. If any of y'all ever meet me in person, I don't look or sound any different than I do right now. And plus with that, on the social media particularly, I decide, where are my potential clients at? Mobile, Gulf Coast tends to be fairly heavy on Facebook, tends to be fairly heavily on LinkedIn. And I don't know anywhere it's not heavy on YouTube. So I focused on those things, and I tried to develop, at least in the beginning, an awareness. I wasn't trying to sell anything in the beginning, and I still don't, but I just simply wanted to put out there that I am Josh Knoll. I'm a decent guy. And, I like to do things open and honestly, and here's my business. And I'm going to start talking to you. I'm going to start unpacking these things that my industry tends to keep in a black box, and see if we can, because a lot of times, Phillip, it was a process of discovery for both of us. I mean, my gosh, through my marketing efforts, I feel like I got an MBA in my industry that I would not have if I had just stayed locked in my room and done it the traditional way. And then what I really learned, and I give you credit for this, and I know your company provides website services, but one of the things I really keyed on was with my website was, one, both a professional and engaging website that was constantly updated, but two, also having, I always call it pushing traffic from land I rent to land I own. So I own my website. I don't own my social media presence. So what I would constantly do is I try to push, anytime I'm promoting something on social media, I'm wanting to push them to land I own, which is my website. Also was fortunate enough that I got some pretty good, decent Google reviews, particularly in my industry compared to my peers. People cannot leave me testimonials, but there is a line there where they can leave reviews, and that shows up on Google search. So right now, if you were to search, financial advisor Fairhope, more often than not, I'm going to be one of the top results. Does that mean somebody's automatically pick me? No, it just means that they're going to at least visit the site. And then once they start digging into the site, because I put so much time and effort into it, they're going to be able to see the story of what Gulf Coast Financial Advisors stands for and what we do, which also helps too, as helps weed out the people that are probably not a good fit anyway. I don't do what they need me to, the service they're looking for. Our personality is not a match. And then what we did was we coupled all that with technology. We started with the basic things of a mailing list, social media, website, YouTube. Any of you self-employed people on this call, entrepreneurs, business owners, if you don't have your Google My Business page set up, do that as soon as this webinar is over. Then from there, you will start walking down a natural progression, which will be where Phillip will come into play, where you start really getting, you start going from blasting a shotgun at hopefully your potential market to now you're kind of an assassin. And Phillip is definitely one of the best guys in the industry that can help you both with your website and your strategy of finding who am I after and how do I get my message in front of them? How do I engage them? How do I keep them engaged? And how do I know they're engaged?
Yeah. The things that I would say, just to kind of sum this up, is you've got to probably have who usually does well is the owner. Sadly, they're you got to have a head of the snake, and usually it's going to be the owner, or you need to create one. So you got to have a lead figurehead. You've got to be very consistent, and you're talking about taking it from stuff you lease to stuff that you own. Very important, but also capturing that contact information so that you can continually provide. And all you have to do is provide relative information. And the easiest way is to use empathy. What if I were in my client's shoes? What are the things that would concern me, based on your services that you provide? What are the things that if I were, what does my client want from me? Well, you better be delivering it, and you better talk about how you're different about delivering it. And if you want better questions, you ask, if you want better answers, you ask better questions, and rinse and repeat. So
plus grease the wheels of contact between you and your potential client.
For sure.
On your website, on your social media, they should have the ability on your website to get a hold of you relatively easily, to set an appointment, to ask a question, to fill out my line of work, a risk tolerance questionnaire, wherever it may be. You need to grease the wheels, because there's nothing wrong with phone calls. God knows Phillip and I spend enough time on the phone, but a lot of times your potential market is not necessarily wanting to talk to you right off the bat.
Yeah.
They want to fill you out a little bit, and you need to grease that wheel so that they can get a hold of you in a manner that they're comfortable with.
I had a keynote speaker at IT Nation a few years back in Orlando, and he held up his phone and he said, "This phone is the number one reason why people think they don't need salespeople or they don't need to speak with somebody. So you have to make it frictionless in order for them to gather enough information so that when decision time comes and they want to speak with somebody, you're the person they want to speak with." One of the things that, and I really I'm very conscious of time, Josh, because we got 5 minutes and I want to answer maybe a couple of questions here. So I'm going to rush through this last piece, but I think technology really properly applied will help you scale your business. And really at the end of the day, what we're all trying to do is become more operationally mature. And because technology is such a solid framework, I think that it's something that we should really focus on trying to deliver a more, this is the example I always use, is years and years and years ago when Hardee's came to Loxley. All right, Hardee's, the hamburger joint. They come to, I love their biscuits, right? So especially then, because there was no competition. But they had on the wall, they had like an ISO, standard for biscuits. It had a picture of a biscuit that was too light. They had one just right, and they had one that's burnt. And at the end of the day, people want the same thing. They want to know what is expected. And there's nothing that will get you there like a process-driven technology that will deliver that same properly cooked biscuit every time. It's a much bigger conversation than what we're going to have today. But I really, I'm a guy that loves technology. And when I hear somebody down on technology, I know they're not doing it right. So for the folks on the call, we want to get to questions here in a second. I will always give you guys a cyber risk assessment. Very intensive. All you have to do is ask, and you can email me right after this. We'll set up a time to really kind of, again, uniquely identify your particular risk and things that could move your organization forward. But more importantly, I want to highlight Josh because you've been so good to come on and share this insightful information. Josh, why don't you outline what you're talking about here?
Well, really, it's just a conversation. We are relatively low maintenance, easygoing group here. I built an organization that kind of mirrors my personality. And I know a lot of times when people are talking about their money, they're uncomfortable. So for us, it's really this is really nothing more than a free conversation. We can do it over the phone. We can do it via Zoom. We can do it in person if you're comfortable with that. I just know that this is just like with Planet Fitness, this is a judgment-free zone. So it really doesn't matter how much money you don't have or do have, or how much you think you don't have. Just come in, we'll have a conversation, we take it from there.
That's right. And I will, like I say, full disclosure, Josh is a great guy, and he has not pressured me. Man, I know that we did a pretty complicated deal, I think, Josh, right? I mean, that's probably one of the more difficult ones. And it took, we probably met 5 times,
at least,
maybe more than that. Yeah. And
worth it.
Very patient. Oh yeah. Oh, very worth it for me too. But it had enough moving parts that took me that long to figure it out. So he's very patient and not pushy at all. So I would encourage you guys, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Give Josh a call and let him see. He'll be honest with you and see if he can, help you out. I bet he can. So, Christy, do we have any questions that we need answered?
Yes. So we had one come in that says, as a business owner, how do you get your team to set their goals as well as get them excited about meeting those goals?
As a business owner, how do you get businesses to come in and discuss their goals with you? Employees, harder, I think, in a way. I don't know, Josh, you start talking and let me think a sec.
Well, I think the main thing is the goals can't come from on high. Now you're going to be responsible as a business owner and the leader to provide the general insight. But if you've already stamped all them suckers in tablets and walked down the mountain and said, here it is, live with it, let's go, it's going to be tough. So I think it needs to be collaborative to a certain degree. You need to be able to provide the broad outline of where you think the business is at, or where the business is at, where you think it's going. And then you need to get feedback and buy-in on what the employees, both they want and what they think they can contribute. Now, you got to be careful with that because you'll end up with 50 different goals, but it's a way to workshop that. And Phillip's as good as anybody with getting a group mindset going to where everybody feels heard and everybody feels like they have buy-in on what they are trying to achieve. Because you just have to remember, your goals are not going to be, more often than not, it's not going to be the employee's goal. If it was the employee's goal, then that's probably going to be a future business owner that's going to leave you, and that's okay. But you definitely want to have buy-in. You don't want to come from the mountain on high and just cram them down people's throat. And also, as we said earlier, the whole point of this webinar was they've also got to be realistic. There's nothing more frustrating working with an organization that just does not have unrealistic goals, and you just feel like you're falling short all the time. And then you end up with frazzled employees that are unhappy. So I think the biggest thing is just get buy-in. It's open communication, especially in 2022. The world has changed. People have a voice and there's power in that voice. Let them speak, let them help determine some of the goals, and then work together until everybody has buy-in.
Yep. And thank you, Josh. You got me to actually pull up a document I used just yesterday. But basically, I have this line of sight document. If people would like to request that, I would be happy to share it. This is something that I think is, you want to start from the top where you don't want your people having a goal that is totally misaligned with the overall mission of the company. This document right here, I would share with folks that I think would help them a lot in trying to think top down. Some of it leadership's got to put together, and then you put a team goal, and then you help the person identify with the team. And I'd be happy to share some of that. So anything else, Christy?
Yes, last question. Is there software out there that will help you track and meet your goals as an organization?
Oh, tons. Absolutely. There's so many of them out there. I mean, you can go get Microsoft Planner and do it. We use a particular product that I am very excited about and to talk about. I could even do a whole presentation on it. It's there's a book out there that Gino Wickman wrote called Traction, and it is the entrepreneurial operating system. And kind of just in a second here, every business has an operating system. They have a way that's operated. Now, the system may move all around and it changes all the time, but it's still an operating system. But this puts a framework in where you have level 10 meetings, people put in issues, they discuss their issues, they solve their issues, they come out into like goals, to-dos, things of that nature. It's called .io. It is 90 NINETY.io. Josh, you want to throw any out there?
No, you hit the ones that we use. I mean, of all the things, all the technology I use, I tend to be a little bit of a throwback on some of my goals. I have a office full of whiteboard, kind of like a beautiful mind without the beautiful part. But I always make sure that I've got, at least I'm tracking and I see them when I walk in, I see them all the time. And then we supplement that strategy with the planning software that you said. The only caveat I would have, I would always caution someone is don't view a busy, booked up, appointment laden day as necessarily you're getting towards your goals. You want to be mindful of that, because I've met some of the busiest people in my life that were running in place. So make sure that if you are, you dive into that software, always have whatever your top 2 or 3 goals in place. And is all of this busyness actually getting you closer to that? Or are you just marking time during the day?
Great advice. Well, that's all the time we have. Josh, thank you so much. And thank everyone for attending. I hope this has been, been helpful to kind of get that different mindset, to actually not be one of the 5% that actually sets goals and achieves them. So let's get to it. 2022 is here. Let's make it happen.
That's right.
Got any questions? Josh, there's his contact information. Y'all have mine. I'm happy to help as always. Thank you so much.
Thank y'all. Have a great day. Thanks for having me, Phillip.
Thanks, buddy. See ya.
See ya.